Welcome to Culture Boost, the place where you get simple answers to your big questions, and where curiosity leads the way. Let's get started. The city of Los Angeles, a place long defined by its vibrant immigrant communities, found itself at the center of a national firestorm last week. The unrest began on the morning of Friday, June 6th. Federal agents from Immigration and Customs Enforcement, known as ICE, launched a series of aggressive and widespread raids across the sprawling metropolis. These operations were a stark departure from previous enforcement actions, targeting not just known locations but also public spaces. Agents descended upon work sites, day laborer gathering spots, and even local restaurants in a coordinated sweep that caught many by surprise. The scale of the operation was significant, creating scenes of confusion and fear in neighborhoods from East LA to the San Fernando Valley. The initial shock from the raids quickly turned to anger and organized resistance. Protests began to form organically as news spread through social media and community networks. However, a single event acted as a powerful catalyst, transforming scattered demonstrations into a unified movement. David Huerta, the widely respected president of SEIU California, a major labor union, was arrested by federal agents. He was not participating in a protest at the time, but was reportedly observing the raids, documenting the actions of the federal officers. His detention was seen by many as a direct attack on organized labor and the right to peaceful observation, galvanizing thousands to take to the streets in protest. The arrest of Huerta sent ripples far beyond the labor community, unifying a broad coalition of civil rights activists, immigrant advocates, and concerned citizens. Over 200 people were detained during the initial raids, but Huerta's high-profile arrest became the symbol of what many viewed as federal overreach. He was later released on a significant $50,000 bond, but the charges against him remained, carrying a potential prison sentence of up to 6 years. For many Angelenos, his arrest was a clear signal that the federal government was targeting not just undocumented individuals, but also those who stood in solidarity with them, escalating the conflict significantly. This series of events set the stage for a weekend of intense and escalating conflict. The initial protests, which were largely peaceful, began to grow in size and intensity. The actions of the federal government were perceived by many as a direct challenge to the values of Los Angeles, which has long prided itself on being a sanctuary city. The city's leadership and its people felt that their local authority and community standards were being deliberately undermined by a federal administration intent on imposing its will. The combination of the aggressive raids and the targeting of a prominent community leader created a volatile mix of anger, fear, and defiance that would soon boil over. In response to the growing civil unrest, President Donald Trump made a decision that has not been seen in the United States for decades. He ordered the deployment of active-duty U.S. military forces to the streets of Los Angeles. This dramatic escalation began with the federalization of the California National Guard, doubling its presence to 4,000 troops, and placing them under federal command. Then, on Tuesday, June 10th, the situation intensified further. Approximately 700 active-duty U.S. Marines from the nearby base at 29 Palms were dispatched into the city. Their stated mission was to protect federal personnel and secure federal properties, such as courthouses and office buildings. This move marks a significant and controversial moment in modern American history. The deployment of active-duty military for domestic law enforcement is severely restricted by the Posse Comitatus Act. It is the first time such a deployment has occurred since the 1992 LA riots. Furthermore, the act of federalizing a state's National Guard without the governor's consent is an extremely rare measure. Last used in 1965 during the Civil Rights era, the Trump administration has justified the action as necessary to prevent what the president called the complete obliteration of the city, framing the protesters as insurrectionist mobs in public statements and on social media. California's state and local leaders have reacted with fury and legal action. Governor Gavin Newsom and Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass have vehemently condemned the federal intervention. They have described it as an illegal and authoritarian provocation designed to escalate the situation for political purposes. Governor Newsom accused President Trump of manufacturing chaos and has filed a federal lawsuit against the administration. The lawsuit seeks to block the military deployment, arguing that it violates the U.S. Constitution and represents a dangerous overreach of executive power. This has created an unprecedented standoff between the state of California and the federal government. The conflict has been further inflamed by heated rhetoric from Washington. President Trump's appointed border czar, Tom Homan, has publicly threatened to arrest Governor Newsom and Mayor Bass, accusing them of obstructing federal law enforcement. The president has publicly endorsed this idea, intensifying the political and legal battle. Meanwhile, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and Attorney General Pam Bondi have defended the administration's actions, insisting they are acting within their authority to restore order and protect federal interests. This has left the city caught in the middle of a constitutional crisis, with federal troops and state authorities operating in a tense and adversarial environment. The streets of downtown Los Angeles have become a contested zone, with protests centering around federal buildings and City Hall. The demonstrations have been met with a forceful response from a combination of local and federal law enforcement. Officers from the Los Angeles Police Department and federal agents have deployed crowd control measures extensively. They have used tear gas, flashbang grenades, pepper balls, and rubber bullets to disperse crowds. Over the course of one weekend, the LAPD reported firing more than 600 rubber bullets into protesting groups. This heavy-handed approach has led to numerous injuries and has been widely criticized by civil rights organizations as excessive and dangerous. Protesters, in turn, have responded with acts of defiance and destruction. Some have thrown fireworks, rocks, and incendiary devices at police lines. At least one police vehicle was set on fire, and a major artery, the US 101 freeway, was briefly shut down by demonstrators. Images of burning Waymo self-driving cars have also become a symbol of the unrest, with at least 5 of the autonomous vehicles set ablaze by protesters. This prompted the company to suspend its robotaxi services in the protest zones. There have also been reports of looting at several businesses near the intersection of 6th Street and Broadway, adding to the sense of chaos in the city's core. The events in Los Angeles have captured national and international attention. Solidarity protests have erupted in other major U.S. cities, including New York, Chicago, San Francisco, and Dallas. In New York City, a sit-in at Trump Tower resulted in 24 arrests. The situation has also drawn condemnation from international figures. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese issued a formal protest after an Australian journalist, Lauren Tomasi, was struck and injured by a rubber bullet allegedly fired by police while she was covering the events in LA. Her injury has highlighted the dangers faced by the press and has brought global scrutiny to the tactics being used by law enforcement. The human toll of the clashes continues to mount. Since the protests began, law enforcement has arrested at least 150 people in Los Angeles alone. The charges range from failure to disperse and curfew violations to more serious offenses like assault on a police officer and looting. Civil rights groups have raised urgent concerns about the treatment of those detained, both from the protests and the initial immigration raids. There are widespread reports that detainees are being held in poor conditions, with many denied timely access to legal counsel, food, or water. This has added a humanitarian dimension to the crisis, with activists demanding accountability and due process for all those taken into custody. As of today, June 11, 2025, a tense and uneasy calm has settled over parts of Los Angeles. The visible presence of military personnel and heavily armed law enforcement remains a constant reminder of the recent turmoil. U.S. Marines continue to guard federal buildings, and convoys of National Guard vehicles are a common sight on city streets. While the large-scale protests of the past few days have subsided, smaller, sporadic demonstrations continue to occur. The atmosphere is one of high alert and the city remains on edge, with many residents worried that any small incident could reignite widespread conflict and violence. The underlying issues that sparked the unrest are far from resolved. The most immediate battle has now moved from the streets to the courtroom. The federal lawsuit filed by the state of California against the Trump administration is proceeding. This legal challenge is of monumental importance, questioning the very limits of presidential power and the constitutional separation of powers between federal and state governments. Legal experts are closely watching the case, as its outcome could set a new precedent for the domestic use of the military. The Trump administration, for its part, has not formally invoked the Insurrection Act, relying instead on what critics call untested legal theories to justify its deployment of active-duty soldiers on American soil. Meanwhile, humanitarian concerns are growing for the hundreds of people detained during the initial ICE raids. Immigrant rights organizations report that many of the more than 200 individuals swept up are being held incommunicado. Some were reportedly kept in the basement of a federal building for over 12 hours without basic necessities. There are now serious fears that these detainees are being transferred to facilities out of state, which would make it incredibly difficult for their families and lawyers to contact them. Civil rights groups have condemned this denial of due process and are working tirelessly to locate the detainees and ensure their rights are protected. The city of Los Angeles now faces a long and difficult path forward. The social and political divisions exposed by the past week's events run deep. The relationship between the community and law enforcement has been severely damaged, and trust in the federal government has plummeted for many. The legal conflict between California and the White House continues to unfold, with the security of the city and the rights of its citizens hanging in the balance. For now, Los Angeles is a city holding its breath, caught between a heavy-handed security presence and the persistent, simmering anger of a populace that feels under siege. The future remains profoundly uncertain. Thanks for watching Culture Boost. If you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, and see you next time.